Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to OWASP London chapter meeting. Today is 7th of October, 6:30 p.m. London time. Here's the agenda for tonight's event. We're going to have a usual OWASP introduction, news and updates from OWASP projects, conferences, trainings. Then we're going to have Miriam Wiesner presenting a talk called What's the Log? So Many Events, So Little Time. So that is about an interesting open source project that you're going to learn. Then we're going to have a Q&A session followed by OWASP Top 10 2021. A brand new OWASP Top 10 has been released. And we have Andrew van der Stok to talk about the brand new OWASP Top 10 project and what's new in OWASP Top 10. We're going to find it out soon. It's going to be followed by Q&A and closing remarks. So my name is Sam Stepanian. I'm OWASP London chapter leader. We have Andra Letz and Sharif Mansour, our OWASP London chapter co-leaders online as well. If you are going to tweet about tonight's event, please use hashtag #OWASPLondon, please. And you can find us on Twitter at OWASP London. Usually at this time, I talk about what is OWASP and about our projects and membership. We recently started playing an interesting video, which is just 1 minute long to tell you everything about OWASP. I'm going to play this video now, and I hope the sound works this time.
OWASP is a nonprofit that stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. OWASP is a community of developers, technologists, and evangelists improving the security of software through tools and resources. OWASP has 100+ active projects, and new project applications are submitted weekly. Projects are open source and are built by our community of volunteers, people just like you. Community and networking. There are hundreds of local chapters worldwide and thousands of members. Meetings are free and open to everyone. They include training, talks, and networking opportunities. Education and training. OWASP hosts many events each year. They are a great way to improve your skills, build your professional network, and learn about new trends in the industry. One of the many ways you can get involved is to become a member. The membership benefits include discounts for events and trainings, your own OWASP email address and Google Workspace access, a vote in our OWASP Global Board elections, and recently, OWASP added a brand new member benefit, access to hands-on application security training through the OWASP Secure Flag Open Platform. Join us and become a member today.
Yes, our OWASP community is worldwide free and open source one, focused on improving the security of application software. So as you heard, our mission is to make application security visible so that people and organizations can make informed decisions about the application security risks. And of course, it is all for free. And our events are open to both members and non-members. So one interesting thing to mention about the membership and is the some of the benefits that were mentioned in the video is that you get a right to vote if you become an OWASP member. And by the way, you can see it in an OWASP member sticker on your screen right now. If you do become an OWASP member, you will get this sticker for your laptop as well. But speaking of voting and board elections, we actually do have OWASP board elections this year. There are 5 board candidates, Avi Duglin, Glenn Tenkati, Lewis Griffith, Grat Ongus, and Vandana Verma. Voting will open next week on the 15th of October, and it will run for 2 weeks, and the results will be announced on the 1st of November 2021. Of course, it's very important that you must be an OWASP member to vote. So if you're not a member yet, please make sure that you do get your membership. You can just go to owasp.org and click on the join button to join OWASP. We also have a brand new member benefit. There is a new free application security foundations level training course from WeHack Purple and Tanya Jenka. And this training course is priced at $500 if you're not an OWASP member, but if you join OWASP, it is free for OWASP members. It's a fantastic training, and we invite you to join OWASP to enjoy the benefits of this training. We actually have another training course as well available, that is Secure Flag, which is also absolutely free for all OWASP members after you join. So how much is OWASP membership? It is $50 per year for individual membership, which roughly translates about 36 pounds, depending on the exchange rate, which keeps fluctuating these days. For students, the membership costs $20 per year. And of course, there's also corporate support or corporate membership or sponsorship available. And also there is a corporate membership drive to celebrate the 20th anniversary of OWASP this year, and you might get a 10% discount during the event. That we had a lifetime individual membership discounts as well. You can also become a lifetime individual member of OWASP. That basically if you prepare for 10 years, you become a lifetime member. That membership is also available to you. Of course, OWASP is a vendor-neutral organization, but we are supported by various organizations and companies, and you can see their logos currently on the screen. We at OWASP London chapter are also lucky to have the following organizations who've been sponsoring our OWASP London chapter. And if you would like to sponsor OWASP London and have your logo on the screen and interact with our participants when we get back into the in-person world and have in-person events, please do get in touch with us to find out how you can become an OWASP London chapter sponsor. Another brand new thing that we have at OWASP is OWASP membership portal. So it is at members.owasp.org, and we now have a QR code for members, so you can prove your membership, and it also will show you the membership start and end. So this portal has now been live for several months, so please make sure you do utilize this and check your membership levels. If you're a lifetime member, for example, it will also show you the lifetime membership there. It will also show you if you are a chapter leader or a project leader, you will be able to find out in this brand new OWASP membership portal. Another great news for OWASP is that we now have a merch store. So if you go to owasp.org/store, you will be able to purchase various merchandise with OWASP branding on it. And of course, as I mentioned, this year we had our OWASP 20th anniversary event. The conference was on the 24th of September. And you can get various items of merchandise with OWASP logo or with a 20th anniversary logo as well. The 20th anniversary conference was a great success on September 24th. We had several tracks and 24 hours of talks. The talks are being recorded and they will be published on the official OWASP Global YouTube channel very soon. Another big event coming up is going to be AppSec USA 2021 virtual conference. This year we're continuing to stay safe and run virtual events. It's going to take place on November 11th. So again, a reminder that our big global virtual conferences or just general AppSec conferences, they're not free. They are paid events. However, if you are an OWASP member, you do get a discount. So that is yet another benefit of being an OWASP member, is get discount to OWASP big conferences, as well as other cybersecurity events, which are providing discounts, which can range anything from 5% to 100% for OWASP members. Another event coming up is virtual training. So the next virtual training event is going to be on November 16th and 17th. You can see the training courses available. There will be applied data science and machine learning for cybersecurity. There will be a training on improving your software development lifecycle with OWASP SAM. There will be a training on automatic security in DevOps, DevSecOps training, and also an offensive approach in security for web developers. So it's going to be a fantastic training delivered by great experts. So you can see the prices are on the screen, and you can just click on the register button to register for this training. And you can see that OWASP members again do get a discount for that training. The next big thing that we're going to run at OWASP London in collaboration with Secure Code Warrior, what is coming up is a big secure coding tournament called the DevOlympics. This is going to take place on October 19th and 20th. So the 2 days, it's absolutely free for you to join and utilize the platform and play versus other players. There will be 5 different arenas focused on different technologies. For example, on cloud security, there will be a dedicated arena on mobile security. And the prizes are in Amazon gift cards, and the top prize in each of the arena is $400 US Amazon gift card. So it's absolutely free to join. Please check it out. You can just go for DevOlympics. We'll place the announcement via our social media. And join us for this great secure coding tournament event. Please do tell your developers, if you're joining from a company which has web developers, mobile app developers, to join this training. Quick update on the OWASP projects. We now have over 200 projects, including 20 flagship projects. I'd like to bring your attention to an OWASP Spotlight project, which has been running by Vanda Naverma, who is a OWASP board member. And she's been recording this 10 to 15 minute videos about every single OWASP project. I think she's done quite a lot of these videos already. Do check them out. If you don't know what a particular OWASP project is about, you can get this 10-minute great extract where Vanda interviews project leaders, and they talk about the project and sometimes do a live demo as well. Moving on, so tonight's event is live, and how do you ask questions today? So if you are logged in to YouTube and you're watching us on YouTube, there is a YouTube Q&A feature, and you can just type your questions here in the YouTube chat. If you are not logged into YouTube or you don't want to use it, you can also ask questions anonymously using slide.do system. So we have a URL, slide.do/OWASP. So you can just click on that URL and ask any question to our speakers. So without further ado, I'd like to move on to our first talk from Miriam. So the talk is called "What the Log? So Many Events, So Little Time." A little bit about Miriam. Miriam is joining us from Nuremberg, from Germany. She is a senior security program manager for Microsoft Defender ATP. So besides Microsoft, she has a focus on secure infrastructure, Windows event logs, of course, Active Directory security, just enough administration. She's also an expert in PowerShell, and many, many more projects. In her spare time, though, she enjoys writing articles for her blog, and also she enjoys developing open source tools. And one of these tools she's gonna talk to us about tonight. And she also presents at various international conferences and events. Miriam is a lifelong learner. She's always excited about new technologies and empowering ours. So Miriam, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you. Welcome to OWASP London.
Thank you, Sam. So let me just share my screen. And here we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, hi there to my presentation. You already announced me so nicely, thank you. So I'm Miriam. I'm working as a program manager at Microsoft 365 Defender. So that means I'm gathering insights from our from our most important customers and feeding the insights also into the product to improve the product. I did not work in that position for my entire career at Microsoft. So before I joined that position, I was working as a premier field engineer, which is some kind of consultant. And this is also where my story starts. Because when I was a premier field engineer, I worked with customers and I did security assessments. So customers wanted to know how secure their infrastructure is. And I assessed the infrastructure and presented what they could improve and how they could be attacked. And after presenting, or after assessing and presenting, usually customers also needed my help, and I helped them also to build their security operations center. And this is a little bit background on how I came up with EventList. Usually, if you look at how attackers operate, most of the time, attackers have all the time in the world to prepare. This is not an accurate picture of myself, how I work with my customers. This should demonstrate an attacker. But usually attackers have all the time in the world to prepare. And when the attacker launches the attack, usually between 24 hours, 48 hours, the entire organization, the entire environment is compromised. But how long does it take until they find out that they have been compromised? And well, if they find out at all, it takes longer than 200 days. And yeah, one reason is that the monitoring in most environments is not really accurate and does not really tell the organization about any attacks going on. And the goal is, of course, to keep the attacker out of the environment and to detect it as soon as possible. And to help with not only detection, but also with security recommendations, Microsoft has released the Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit, which you can download on this website shown here. And within this toolset or toolkit, you don't only find tools like the policy analyzer, you also have security baselines. And if we have a closer look into one of those security baselines with a policy analyzer, you can see that those security baselines not only contain recommendations, but also event recommendations, so what to monitor. So monitoring recommendations, auditing recommendations. Just a hint, now that you know about those amazing baselines, don't go ahead and just turn them on for your environment. No, please be careful, because those are the best practices. And if you just apply best practices without really having evaluated what you want to apply, then you maybe lock something out that you will regret. Therefore, be careful with applying those policies, but it's definitely worth a try. Okay, coming back to the auditing recommendations. You can see here are several settings that are recommended, success and failure. For example, here, credential validation. But well, what does that mean? So if you look into the event log, you already see so many events. And well, if you turn on those audit policies, even more events are being generated. And back then I worked with a customer, and my customer heard about this tool set and about the baselines, and was like, oh yeah, that is great. But do you know what event IDs? Okay. So my customer asked me, yeah, well, this is great, but do you know which event IDs are being generated if I turn on this baseline? Is there a documentation? And in fact, we do have a documentation, but the documentation is around, I think, 754 pages or something like that. And I told my customer, yes, we do have this amazing document. You find all the details there. And my customer was like, well, maybe something smaller that we can really use to apply all those baselines and evaluate what event IDs are being generated. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, there's not a one-pager. And so my customer asked me to write down all the events that would be generated if they would apply this certain baseline, for example, for Windows Server 2016. And I was not super excited because that was a lot of work. But well, the customer paid me. And so I sat down and I wrote down all the event IDs that would be generated if they applied the server baseline for Windows Server 2016. And I was almost done when the customer approached me and came to my desk. And they asked me, well, while you're doing that, we also would like to apply this baseline to domain controllers. And what about Windows Server 2012 R2? And what about this other baseline and this baseline too? Can you also write down all the events that are being generated for those baselines? And I was like, OMG, no way. Because if I would really write down all the events and correlate them to all those baselines, that would take years. And so, yeah, I was not too happy about the ask, but I thought what I could do. And this is when I came up with EventList in the first version. So EventList in the first version was an Excel document with some macros behind, and you had the option to import baselines. So just right out of the security compliance toolkit. And then a drop-down was generated, and you can choose which baseline you wanted to select. And then you could click on Generate Event List for a baseline. And a baseline or an event list was generated. So here you could see all the event IDs, the categories that this audit recommendation would fall in. Also a link to get more information about the event and the audit recommendation. And the customer was happy. I moved on. I worked with other customers and also showed event list. So back then I called my Excel document event list. And I talked to other customers, and one other customer came to me and said, yeah, event list is great. But have you heard about MITRE ATT&CK? And I don't know if you have heard about MITRE ATT&CK. I think you did, but for those who haven't, MITRE ATT&CK is a framework to systematically map attackers' behaviors to help closing gaps in organizations' cyber defense and protection. And there is this amazing website, and you have a lot of scenarios there, and you have all the attack techniques and areas. So you see here all the areas, you have here the techniques, and you can map the attacks, the attack scenarios into this framework to really check if you have covered the scenario. And of course, I heard about MITRE ATT&CK, but I never thought about really also seeing this in the correlation of the event IDs and event list. And so I thought, okay, how can I map that? And if you look at Windows event IDs, because EventList only correlates Windows event IDs, and if you only look at Windows event IDs, this covers this small part from data sources. So yes, EventList can help you to improve your detection strategy, but remember, it's only Windows event IDs, and therefore there's a lot more work to do. Here, a close-up. In general, I worked with a lot of customers, so this is when EventList was developed to the state that it is today. And I helped them building their SOCs. And usually there were 3 questions coming up when I work with customers. So first question, you already heard it. If I apply a certain baseline, what events are being generated. The second question, what events should be forwarded? Because, well, maybe customers don't have all the storage space in the world. There are, log solutions that you need to pay if you want to have more storage space. So this can get quite expensive if you are not prepared. So what are the most important events to audit? And last but not least, if you have all the data, what do you do with it? Well, some people I worked with in the past said, well, we after I asked the question, what are you doing if you collect all these events? And some people said, well, we keep these events for forensic purposes. So in case that we are getting breached, that we have everything there. But, well, you don't want to just keep it for forensic purposes, because if you are getting breached and if you have never looked at the data, you will have no idea what happened. And therefore, last but not least, you want to be proactive and you want to build hunting queries. And this is what I try to address with EventList. And so this was what I worked in EventList first version. So it quickly was developed into a UI. So what started with an Excel sheet, I turned over into PowerShell UI. And I also got a lot of feedback. And one feedback was, can you also make it accessible via PowerShell command line, not only via the UI, because people would like to automate. And of course I did. And this is the current version that is released. So you have not only the UI, but you also have the command line. And this is what I'm going to demo right now. So I recorded the demo for you. And of course, everything starts with PowerShell. It was written in PowerShell. So type in open EventList GUI to open, and EventList UI opens. And you can see here are all the MITRE ATT&CK areas and techniques. Okay, it needs to be a little bit refreshed, but it's still there in the old original MITRE ATT&CK framework, which you still can correlate. And if you would like to also help with the refreshing the data, because data refreshes all the time, let me know. I have my contact data later in the later slide. And what you can do now. First question was, what events are being generated if you apply a certain baseline? So EventList comes with some pre-imported baselines. And you can also import your own baselines, your own GPOs. But if you select a certain baseline, then it applies, and you can immediately see what MITRE ATT&CK techniques would be covered with that. You can also import your own GPO or baseline. In this example here, I'm importing a GPO. And you just need to select the folder. If you select the folder, then all baselines that are in this folder are imported. You see here the GPO was imported. I just imported a single GPO in this case. And if I selected, all the baselines are being imported. And here in the next example, I show how it looks like if I select an entire folder with baselines that are partly already imported in EventList. And all the baselines that are already imported, you see they are not imported once more, but all the other baselines that are missing are being imported. And it takes some time because, of course, it just scans the entire folder and checks if the baseline is already in the system or not. And once everything is imported, you see that there are many new baselines that you can now also use and select. So, but this does not yet answer what events are being generated. Of course, it's also possible to delete one baseline or to delete all baselines and to import your own baselines. So yeah, to have all baselines back, you need to import it. And before we go to the PowerShell demo, basically, I resetted everything in the EventList database before I started the PowerShell demo. So yeah. So this is also possible via command line now. So you can check out what commands exist by using the get command cmdlet. And those are all the commands that you can use currently. With the get baseline from DB, you can show or display all the baselines that currently are imported into the database. And of course, you can also remove all the baselines with remove all baselines. So you see everything was deleted. You can import them once again with import baseline from folder. You need to specify the path, the folder where, oh, sorry, I moved my mouse. You can specify the path where your baselines are located with a path parameter. And here you go. I just imported one baseline, one GPO. And you can also import multiple baselines, just use a path or a folder where multiple baselines are located. So this takes some time. And once it's imported, you can use them as normal. And here we go. And you see also all the imported baselines are in the database. So for the further process, you can, for example, use select to only use one baseline. So you see the baseline name, but you can also just specify the name to do further operations. So the cmdlet remove one baseline does exactly that. It removes one baseline from the database. And now with those commands, you can use the command line to operate EventList without using the UI. So you can write your own automations. And of course, it's also possible, as I said before, to just use the name of a baseline. You can use the parameter baseline name, but as you saw before, it's also possible to pipe a baseline into the command remove one baseline, and you see the baseline was removed. Now, this does not answer yet how you find out what events are being mapped to a certain baseline. And this is what I will show in this demo here. So you select a baseline. And all the MITRE ATT&CK techniques are being populated, and you click on Generate Event List on the right side of the panel. And now here in the pop-up, you have two options. The first option is to generate baseline events only. So that really addresses if you want to understand what events are being generated if you apply a certain baseline. And the second option just does it from the other side around. So the output is different. The first one is really what is shown if a baseline would be applied. And the second is to match MITRE ATT&CK with event IDs. And you also have the option to export it as a CSV. So if you check that, then a folder picker is open so that you can select where your baseline should be stored. And if we here select baseline events only, click on OK, you immediately see all the event IDs and the links and also the additional information and audit recommendation that is or that would be applied if you turn on this baseline. So if we say all MITRE ATT&CK events only, you can use a baseline, but you can also just select the areas and techniques and select all MITRE ATT&CK events. And if you click on OK, you see here the technique, technique ID, the technique name, the event ID, event name, and also a link. And yes, there's still a lot of description and link missing. So if you have some time and want to help me, that would be great. Here you see how you can pick a folder to export it as a CSV. Yeah, and this is also possible using PowerShell. So get baseline from the DB is one of my best friends here in these demos because it just gets me one of the baseline names without doing too much. And if you pipe it into get baseline event list, then you can see here everything that I already showed you via the UI. But here it's a nice PowerShell object which you can use to process later in your automation. And you have all the event ID, the description. And if you use out-grid view, you can also just have the same view as we had before in the UI. The MITRE list is the commandlet get MITRE event list. And it's similar, but with the get MITRE event list, you get a lot more of events that I did not put a description in yet. But yeah, you can already use that to do your correlation, to do your research. And also, again, here without grid view, you can open the view once more. You can always use the baseline name with the command. So you can, for example, pipe it there into get MITRE event list. And for better understanding, I show everything here in alt grid view. So if you would use the Windows Server 2019 domain controller baseline, this is what MITRE ATT&CK techniques would be covered. But you can also just pipe in the technique names. So in this scenario, in this demo, I'm writing down 3 different techniques and showing you that it can also just be piped into get MITRE event list. If you have a scenario, for example, where you get all the techniques out, you can just pipe it into the command and see what event IDs would be generated. And here you go. Also, if possible, with a link and a description, but yeah. Of course, it's also possible to use the identity parameter. And in this demo, I show you can pass one technique there over the identity parameter, but you can also pass multiple techniques using the identity parameter. let's use alt grid view because that's easier to see. So same thing in green. And you can also just use the baseline name, also using the identity parameter, because identity parameter is just for the techniques or the baselines. So first question, or first question is checked, because now you can understand what events will be generated if you apply a certain baseline. And even better, you can also map those events to MITRE ATT&CK. The second question, which events should be forwarded? And this is also something that can be done via EventList. Now, first I show you this via the UI. So select techniques, select baselines, and use the generate agent config. And when I wrote this tool, it was just before I joined into my current position. So I was super euphoric that I became a PM for Defender for Endpoint. So now it's called Defender for Endpoint. Back then it was called Microsoft Defender ATP. And therefore I had to implement this Easter egg. I'm sorry, not sorry, but yeah, that is still a remain from then. You have also Splunk Universal Forwarder, for example, and this is just the syntax that Splunk needs. You can just copy and paste it into your configuration, but you can also say, okay, you would like to have it XPath in an XPath output, which is, for example, ArcSight or Windows Event Forwarding, or even Azure Sentinel. So you can just copy and paste it. And the same thing is possible if you use the command line. And here it's the get agent config string. And with get help, which is from the PowerShell help system, you can just see what is possible with this commandlet. So you see here, I have the parameter forwarder name specified. And of course, also the identity parameter. With the identity, again, you can use either baselines or techniques. But with a forwarder name, currently you can specify Splunk, XPath, or MDATP. Well, MDATP does not make too much sense to specify it here because, as I said, only an Easter egg, but Splunk and XPath are definitely worth your time. If you have other ideas for other agent forwarders, let me know how the syntax looks like and what forwarder you would like to see implemented. And so you can use here get agent config string using identity. And in this example, I use a technique. Well, not one technique, but multiple techniques. And then after I specify the techniques, you can select the forwarder. And remember, current options are Splunk and XPath, or worthwhile options. And if I specify Splunk, here you go, you directly have your whitelisting options. And if I specify XPath, it's in XPath syntax. Yeah, as I said, MDATP is not the most worthwhile option at this very moment because you don't need event IDs for MDATP. Here, of course, it's also possible to use a baseline name with the identity parameter. In this case, I just pipe it there. So you can use the pipe for get agent config string. And here you go, you see the entire event IDs that would make sense for this baseline. And yeah, so that's basically the agent forwarder function. So next topic, check. You can also see what events are worthwhile your time and your storage space to be forwarded. And last question, what to do? How can you proactively hunt? How do you know which queries are the best here? And to do that, first I thought, okay, I could build it by my own, everything to just translate all the queries, until I found out, oh, there is actually already a project which does that, which is called Sigma. And Sigma uses a generic signature description, so-called YAML files. And using the Sigma converter, it just translates it into each language. And I was also, I'm also responsible that they also implemented Azure Log Analytics back then. And yeah, so I used to work with someone from the field with whom I did a lot of work to get that implemented. Yeah. So basically, this is already available. And this just translates everything that you write in YAML format into the language of your choice. And therefore, I rely on Sigma to translate all the queries. And here is a demo. And Sigma is written in Python. So yeah, it could take some time. And here in this demo, I explain that later. In this demo, here I select baseline. And if I don't have Sigma pre-installed, so there is an option to configure EventList. I will show that later. If EventList is configured, then it is already translated into from PowerShell into Python, into the and everything is generated. If Sigma is not configured in the EventList configuration, then you can just have the queries that you would need to use to generate the Sigma output. And here I use Microsoft Defender ATP because yes, it makes sense to have also queries for Defender. There are the advanced hunting queries. And you can specify where it should be stored. And here you see I only have the Markdown file and the txt. So the Markdown file just shows you everything in plain Markdown. So in this option, in the first option, I did not configure EventList. So that means you see here, there's the Python exe, which calls Sigma, and then with every YAML file that it should translate. And the benefit of the Markdown file is if you need to write documentation, you just can just copy and paste it. And your documentation system already should format it properly, and you just can alter it and edit it. And yeah, you can just copy it. And if you have a backend Sigma server, you can just run it there. So you have all the YAML file also as an output. In the YAML folder, you have the txt file. There you have just the plain queries you need to run. And you can just take the entire package, here are the YAML files, onto your backend server and use one system to generate the output. There is also the option just to generate YAML format. This is just for documentational purposes. So if you select that and specify where it should be stored, then you get the folder with the YAML files. And in the Markdown file, you see all the YAML output just pasted in there so that you can work with that and specify your own queries. And in the YAML folder, you have the YAML files. I already told you about configuring event list, and there is this button, configure event list, and there is configure Sigma path. If you select that, you can choose where the Sigma C file is located. And here we go. It's usually in the tools folder. I select the folder, I click OK. And if everything worked, then you will see, okay, the Sigma path is shown with a Sigma C file. And now EventList is configured to accept direct queries to Sigma. And here I select Splunk and say, okay, let's generate. You select the folder where the output should be stored and click OK. And this takes some time because I already said my tool is written in PowerShell, Sigma is written in Python, and yeah, my PowerShell tool calls Python to then generate the queries to go back to PowerShell. And therefore, I'm just fast forwarding here. This takes a lot of time, or some time at least. And here you go. The queries are written. And in this case, you see 3 files. You see the Markdown file, you see the text file, and the log file. In the Markdown file, you have a similar format, but here you have the translated query that you can already use. You can also use it for documentation purpose, of course. Then, yeah, of course, you can also just select everything. Then you have also the txt file with just the plain queries. No need to just have all the documentation stuff if you don't need it. And there's also the log file. And you see what YAML files were processed. And if some files were not supported, and if there were errors, then you will see it here in this log. So you see here, this feature is not supported. So either the language is not able, or not the language, but the tool is not able to understand something like that, to interpret something like that, or it's not yet supported. And either you can, for example, reach out to the Sigma team to get it supported, to also work on your own stuff to get it supported by yourself. Or you can maybe also understand why it's not supported, because maybe the target system does not support any operation like that. And you also have the YAML files again. Now in PowerShell, this is also possible. So you have the cmd get Sigma supported theme from database. And with that, you can see what options you can enter or to which systems you can translate. And here I'm just writing down some technique IDs. And if you use or if you pipe those techniques, into the function get Sigma queries, you specify the path where your output queries should be stored. So basically just the same thing that we did from the UI, but now we are the command line. And you specify the theme name, and the theme name is one of the names that you already saw here, or that you can evaluate using get Sigma supported theme from database. And here you go, all again, the Markdown file, the text file, and the YAML folder. You can also do the same with any other language or with any other target system that is supported. And of course, this does not only work with the techniques. You can also just specify a baseline and also either pipe it or specify it. And using, again, get Sigma queries, using a path and the name of your target system. you can also translate the entire baseline into event IDs and into hunting queries. And in this scenario, EventList is not yet configured. So you see here, you would just get the queries to export it and to run them in your backend. And here Get Sigma Queries also supports the identity parameter. So either you pipe it or you specify it using the identity parameter. Again, use the path where you want to save your query output, and also specify the target system. And here you go. Well, this is not a very big file, I would say, because I just specified one technique in this example, but nevertheless, maybe there's a use case you want to do that. There's also the option to get YAML only output, so that the option that you already saw in the UI. So that does mean it does not translate anything. You have the plain YAML output there. Maybe it makes sense for you to just specify certain techniques to only get the output from YAML, to know what the query should look like. So YAML file is just there to have understanding of what you should monitor. Now, as I said, we can configure also EventList from the command line. You use the add EventList configuration and specify the path using the parameter sigma path. If you use get sigma path, you see that it's configured if the right path was specified. So you can also use get sigma path to check if it's configured or not, if you want to implement checks. And now you can run also get sigma queries, piping techniques or baselines, specifying it using identity. And here you go. Yeah, it needs a little bit. So the log file is created first. I fast forward here a little bit. You see how the log file grows. And once the MD file and the TXT file is in the folder, you know that everything was written. And here you go with your nice queries. But you can also remove the Sigma path or the configuration with remove event list configuration if you want to automate that. Now get Sigma path is empty. Yeah, there are maybe some scenarios where you just want to automate everything from the command line. And last but not least question, hunting queries, check. So you can also do or generate hunting queries not only from the UI, but also from the command line. And I also implemented some additional goodies. So let me just quickly show what we have here, because you maybe noticed that there is also the YAML admin option. And this option is there to be the master of your own YAML files. So if you say, okay, everything that is already in EventList, well, I don't like that stuff, please remove that. You can remove the existing configuration, but you can also import existing YAML files if you want to enrich EventList with using your own YAML files. And if you select certain techniques and areas, you can. I was a little bit too fast here. So if you select the techniques and areas, you can use generate GPO and create a GPO out of it, specify where it should be stored. Currently, with generate GPO, only the advanced audit policies are generated, but I'm also working on maybe also getting PowerShell logs in there at some point. And you see here a nice GPO with all the audit functions. And you can also do that using the command line. Remove all YAML configuration, just removes everything from the database, just dumps everything. And with import YAML configuration from folder, you can import your own YAML files and yeah, just use the path to specify where those YAML files are located. I'm fast forwarding a little bit because that is a huge amount of YAML files that I'm importing here in this demo. So here you go, everything is imported. And now let's have a look how you can create your GPO out of just techniques. If you just specify a certain amount of techniques, the GPO is also not the most extensive GPO, but maybe there are use cases where you would like to do that. So in this example here, I specify 3 techniques. And pipe it into get group policy from MITRE techniques. Specify the path where it should be stored. And here you go, your very own GPO. And you can also look into it here. It also has a nice GUID generated. And you have everything in there that you need to detect those MITRE techniques from the specified techniques. Sorry, you can also use the identity parameter. So this is also an option. You can pipe it. You can use the identity parameter. You can use MITRE ATT&CK techniques. Well, it would not make sense to use baselines and pipe it into another baseline, but I think that's also possible. But yeah, so feel free what you like to do here with creating policies. And here is a short overview of all the CMDlets that are available, all the functions that are available that come with EventList in the current version. You can also just, if you work with EventList, you can just use the normal get command CMDlet, which is part of the PowerShell help system, specifying the module parameter and specifying that you want to have all the CMDlets from EventList specified. And I mentioned before, currently I'm doing all the work on EventList on my own. So that means that it takes a lot of work, a lot of time to get changes in. And I still have some stuff on my computer that I haven't submitted yet because I'm still working on it. And it just is a huge amount of work for one person only. So if you have any interest, if you are passionate about detecting, passionate about improving open source tools, I would love to have you on my team with EventList. And yeah, maybe you have even your own ideas and suggestions, what we can realize. Let me know. You can either do your own work and just create a pull request, but I would suggest reach out to me first. But here you have all the options, how you can contact me. So in the best case, we are Twitter. My DMs are open. You find my repository EventList on GitHub. And yeah, so just summarized, security auditing is great. And you definitely need it to be aware if your environment is under attack or if fishy stuff is going on in your environment. And to help you with the detection, just using event IDs. EventList can help you, and you now can even automate your own operations. And last but not least, I'm super interested what ideas you have, what's your use case. So let me know if you use EventList. I would definitely love to hear about how you use it. There are already some open source projects out there that use EventList as a base. So let me know. I'm excited about your use case, and yeah, thanks for that. That was EventList.
Excellent. Thank you very much for an amazing presentation, Miriam, and great demo as well, even though it's fantastic that you actually pre-recorded it, because I prefer to do my demos live and something always goes wrong, but that's just the thrill of it. And, yeah, it's absolutely fascinating that you actually worked on this open source project yourself for such a long time, and it's so comprehensive. I was particularly impressed by the fact that you support so many forwarders, right? So almost every single SIM system that I can think about, it was actually listed. I'm like, okay, I might actually get back to you on one of the newer SIM systems, which you might want to integrate later on, but I don't think that's ready yet. I actually have a question. Well, I had several questions. I think we were waiting for more questions to come. Again, a reminder to everyone, if you would like to ask questions, you can do it in the YouTube Q&A chat, or go to sli.do/OWASP. So slido/OWASP, as I advertised previously. Please do ask questions. I had a few questions when I was watching. So one thing was probably a comment rather than a question. When you showed me the log file didn't have timestamps. So basically, so executing this, that, but then, so you know, when it reached to the unsupported feature, when there was an error, that was the log file. It didn't have the timestamps. That's the log file which the tool was generating.
Oh, that's
important, but I think
good.
it would be just good to actually understand how long things take, because obviously there are so many steps that it's running, and it would be good to understand, you know, by just looking at the timestamps. And of course, the next question I had was on the unsupported feature. So if there's an unsupported feature in Sigma which is being hit, then of course I can see there was a Python error message in there. Is it something that, for example, by asking for more open source contributors, they can come and help you out to basically make sure that the that feature is implemented in the product?
Yeah, just to clarify, so Sigma is not my open source tool. I just leverage it because it is already awesome. I'm just leveraging it for the hunting queries. So if people want to contribute, there is also, let me just go back. I think I also linked the page. Here you go. This is the Sigma repository. So if you want to contribute there, go ahead and also connect with Florian.
Yeah, Florian
I'm sure,
Roth, yeah, I think is a name known to a lot of cybersecurity people. Yeah, so of course we're aware of Sigma. So that's yeah, that's great. So if we can basically enhance it and make sure that Sigma is fully supported on all the features, which is great.
So there are basically several reasons why some queries might not be supported. So one thing is, well, maybe Sigma does not support it yet. The other reason could be the target system, the target SIEM, does not have such a function or does not offer such a function. So yeah, this is unfortunately another sad reason. I don't know what we can do to fix that other than get hired by the SIEM vendor and write the detection yourself or write the feature yourself. But yeah.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's totally understood. So say that's basically the mapping of the feature, which is missing. Yeah, and the other thing that I've noticed, of course, in the GUI, you did have like on you. The question is, would it be possible to have a feature where a user can create a predefined thread IDs bundled in sort of their own collections, and they can name it for, I don't know, red teaming or blue teaming, or I don't know, some code name project, so they can bundle several thread IDs into one name, and they can just use them like that. You showed there was a one box on the GUI that you showed which said collections, right? And so it's like a generic one, but it's basically to create the custom ones, so people could basically do cherry pick thread IDs themselves for a particular exercise. For example, purple teaming, I think that would be good. Yeah, so you can see the last one, which just says collection, so it's a execution. So these are like a different stages of the MITRE. But my point is, it would be possible to basically create own grouping, right, for the company who is
in general,
using it.
yes.
Yeah, and just basically collect them, because I know on the command line, when you show the PowerShell, you can basically give a CSV list of them, and it probably would be possible to automate them if you pre-save those thread IDs into a file. But on the GUI, I think it would be good to have a feature of sort of custom thread IDs.
Yeah, let me quickly switch my presentation monitor, then I can show you, if that's of interest, how the database behind looks like. Because everything is possible if you already have the database there, or the database access. Let me just share once more. And here you go.
Yeah, we can see a screen. Yeah, there you go. That's
amazing. Amazing. So the question was if we can specify what we see here. So if you can specify your own MITRE ATT&CK framework, for example. And the answer is yes, but you would have also to map stuff. So what I do have here, so I have the events main. Events main, please. Here you go. Okay, I already had it open. And this is basically where I have all the events mapped to documentation. Source ID, this is also something that I'm currently working on. I also try to specify the source, the log source. You also have the success failure and the recommendation ID, which you can then link. I have here the event ID, the event name, the link, and this is basically the best table of all, because you have all the stuff here. And what I also do sometimes, if somebody asks me about a certain event ID, for example, if I look for firewall, I just quickly open my database and just query for all events that have firewall in the event name.
See, excellent. So the switch is already there, so it's just in the backend database.
Yes, you can. Here, the MITRE attack techniques are in the MITRE techniques, and then you have the, where's the okay, now I'm blind. That's great, because I'm presenting. That's always the thing.
No problem. Yeah, but I can see the map there, so obviously because of the database, and I just think it would be good to have a like a GUI interface, so the user could actually do it from the UI rather than hack into the backend database to modify it there. But obviously the feature is available, and it's great to see that the database is already geared up for that sort of customization if a user actually wants to customize the tool to their requirements. And yeah, for your example with firewall is actually a good one, right? So for example, someone can just go and search for the all the threats with the word firewall in it and identify them all. Yeah,
and if you are up to develop a new feature for EventList, I'm so happy to have you on the team. So yeah, so if you have a great idea, for example, specify that from the UI, happy to brainstorm with you how that can be done.
Excellent, excellent. Right, let's check if we have any more questions on the YouTube chat or on the Q&A. I think we're only seeing a thank you, saying great talk, useful tool, and fantastic presentation. Many thanks, Miriam. Many thanks for presenting at OWASP London. I think this is it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much. All right, if I can then switch to sharing my screen. Again, a reminder for everyone that tonight, if you would like to ask questions live, just use the YouTube Q&A feature if you have a YouTube account, or you can use Slido tool where you can ask questions anonymously if you prefer. Right. So next talk, I would like to introduce Andrew van der Stok, who is joining us from Colorado Springs, USA. Again, fantastic thing that we have virtual meetings and we can have speakers joining us from all over the world. Andrew is an acknowledged leader in application security field. It's more than 20 years of security experience in Australia and in the USA, where he moved recently. Andrew actually joined OWASP in 2002, amazingly, and he originally served as OWASP Sydney chapter leader and OWASP Melbourne chapter co-leader. Over the years, Andrew was involved in leading and working on many OWASP projects. So you might be familiar with OWASP Developer Guide, ESAPI for PHP, of course, OWASP ASVS. If you ever attended our in-person events, you remember that Andrew actually presented a new version of ASVS live at one of our in-person events a few years ago. Another project that Andrew worked on was proactive controls, which is another very important project. And I urge you to check it out if you only know about OWASP Top 10. If you don't know about proactive controls, definitely do and check it out, because that's top 10 proactive controls for developers. Andrew's corporate world experience includes directorship role at KPMG Australia, and he also was a senior principal consultant at Synopsys. So currently Andrew is the executive director at OWASP, and he's taking our foundation through organizational change and taking our mission to the next level. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us today, Andrew. I'm going to stop sharing your screen and invite you to talk to us about brand new OWASP Top 10.
G'day, thank you for that introduction. It's actually November of 2001 when I was doing the research for the OWASP Top 10, so the 20th anniversary. I was actually a little bit fuzzy on when I joined, but my first post was about November 11, 2001, but I certainly wasn't there at the very beginning. There were so many others that were instrumental to the success in the early stages of OWASP. Let me get my presentation going. And then you'd think after all this time I'd be good at Zoom. Okay.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Fantastic. Okay, let me just make sure the clicker is doing the clicker thing. The clicker is doing the clicker thing. Yay. Okay, so yes, welcome to the new OWASP Top 10. For those of you who have seen this talk at the 20th anniversary, it's mostly the same. There are some additional slides because there was some considerable time constraints at the 20th anniversary. But for those of you who have not seen it, you can tell that we've got a new look. Let's check it out. So the top 10 has always been about risks, not impacts, likelihoods, or vulnerabilities. It's not about the breach value. There are many people who are upset with us for not ordering the OWASP Top 10 in their preferred way, or the things that are in the OWASP Top 10 aren't necessarily the things that they think are the most important. So depending on your view of the data, they may disagree with our ordering, but I'll have one thing to say to them, which is essentially either get more data than us, and we have 515,000 apps worth of data, or as Brian Glass did, who's now a co-leader, have a better analysis. We're going to be making the data available. I am actually missing an OWASP Top 10 leaders meeting at the moment, but that's okay. We absolutely intend to release the entire data set so that you can do your own data analysis. The thing that is sort of important, though, is that we did some changes to the way that we collect the data and analyze the data. And so we bucketed it. And one of those things that's different is we encourage everybody to think about the OWASP Top 10 as a starting point. It is the bare minimum to avoid negligence. Therefore, if it's A1 or A10, you should be doing it all. It's one of the very few things that is one of the reasons why the OWASP Top 10 is not a standard. That means that you should be doing everything, even if it's A9 or A7 or A3. You shouldn't just be doing the top 3 and hoping. That's not going to be enough. So you can disagree with about the ordering. I'm very happy for that to happen because it's not supposed to be, these are the most important things, we're going to do them in order. Okay, the audience is obviously developers, lead developers, and architects. And because we made that change in the 2017 version, we have actually seen an impact. And the impact is injection, even when cross-site scripting and JavaScript injection is shoved into injections, it is no longer number one. It wasn't even close. So that is actually the impact we're trying to have. We don't want to have the same list for 7 updates in a row. That makes no value to anybody, but it does show the value of the original dataset established by Dave Wickers and Jeff Williams. They created the first version in 2003 using the information they had to hand from their consultancy at the time, which was AppSec Security. Full disclosure, I worked for AppSec in the late 2000s. And obviously during that time, I was the OWASP Top 10 leader at the same time. We obviously will want framework developers to continue their work. And I think this is where we've had the biggest change. Cross-site scripting has fallen off the map because people are now using Vue, React, and other relatively safe frameworks that you really do have to go out of your way to shoot yourself in the foot. You still can, it's JavaScript. But if you do it the right way with using the idioms from Vue, React, and whatnot, you just won't have it. It'll automatically get encoded for you correctly, and therefore you don't have cross-site scripting by doing no additional work. That's exactly what we need people to continue to do, is not only adopt better frameworks, but for framework developers to look at our list and actually start to work on bug classes and then remediate those bug classes. Of course, we are looking at program managers such as CISOs, CTOs, head of AppSec. We do want people to look at the OWASP Top 10 as being a starting point and not an end journey. So we actually do have some stuff for them. But of course, everybody else, AppSec professionals, consultancies, tools, tool vendors, trainers, and others, they all use the OWASP Top 10. Various people claim compliance with it, and I'll talk to you about why that's not possible in a little bit. The leaders as they stand, in 2017, Dave Wickers handed over the leadership to myself. We had to redo the 2017 one in a bit of a hurry. We had to reopen the data collection a little bit and do much better data analysis, which again is actually how Brian became a co-leader. I love that sort of constructive element of our community. He provided a 3-part blog post that basically described all of the problems with our data analysis and the quality of the data we had. By bringing him on board, the top 10 has never been more data-driven than it has been in the past. The quality of the data analysis is also much better now. So a lot of the early work in 2020 was done by Brian, and we'll talk about the impact of 2020 in a little bit, but Brian, Torsten, Neil, and myself, one of the things that makes a very healthy OWASP project is having multiple leaders. We recently added Eli Lang as a co-lead of the ASVS because he brings fresh insight and a healthy contrary view to some of us because he's an actual practitioner. He has to use the ASVS in his day job, and therefore he understands its weaknesses and its issues, and that makes a much stronger project. If you are running a project or leading a project, don't be afraid of getting more leaders. OWASP Foundation supports up to 5 leaders of a project. You can have as many project contributors as you wish, and we encourage that tremendously. It has made the OWASP Top 10 a far stronger document in both 2017 and in 2021. So as I mentioned, injection is no longer number 1, which is fantastic. Finally, when we actually analyzed and bucketed all the data, we combined all of the different types of injections. So there is a pattern where intermingled user-supplied data is intermingled with program structure. That's a very bad pattern, and I wish nothing did it, but it is it's a fundamental feature of almost everything. So we are absolutely committed to helping people to use better frameworks that can help you avoid this issue. By combining all of the CWEs that had that injection pattern into one, it no longer was one. It wasn't two. It eventually rose to, I think, 3 or 4. We'll check it out as we go through. We made it shorter by design. I was adamant that we were making it mobile first. For those of you who have not seen it yet, it's at owasp.org/top10. It is now consumable directly on a mobile phone, even with a little tiny iPhone 13 mini. It works just fine on that. And that's really important to me because people consume media not in printed form anymore, not in A4 or US letter, but on their mobiles. The cheat sheets are by far the most popular website at OWASP because it is mobile friendly. And I hope that the top 10 will take the cheat sheets place, but we'll see. There's a lot of very, very practical advice for the cheat sheets, and I think it'll still be a very popular site regardless. We are currently working on finishing up the PDF and a wall poster. We want, as people start to go back to their cubicles or if they're working from home, to be able to have a single page poster of the OWASP Top 10 that basically explains what it is and what you can do about it and where to get more information. That'll be developer centric. It won't be AppSec professional centric. If people want to contribute additional posters, work with us. Obviously, we have refreshed the look. We are working with Hugo, a long-time graphic designer who knows OWASP in and out. He has actually given us a new design language, and we're going to be using him to produce the PDF and also the wall posters. I finally gave up. We do realize people use the OWASP Top 10 as a standard. I call it a pseudo standard because it's not a very good one, and also as a basic AppSec program. So say, for example, you're coming from an environment where it was just one person and they didn't think about application security at all. How do you start an AppSec program using the OWASP Top 10? We have small chapters on both of those and where to go from here. It's really important to understand that OpenSAM is a much better choice than the OWASP Top 10 for this, but there's also other elements to getting a secure development lifecycle that is agile friendly, that works with DevSecOps, that actually does things, that doesn't introduce stage gates, because stage gates are evil and they have to die. Anyway, the other thing we've done is we've actually re-normalized all the titles. They're now just about root causes, and this may cause people concern. We realized in 2017 that sensitive data exposure was a symptom and not a root cause. And now, because we did actually have elements of SDE throughout the OWASP Top 10 2017, it's now in its own little bucket of access control. So what we want you to do is actually think about those root causes and what you can do about them, rather than trying to put band-aids over the symptoms. We don't want band-aids. We want fundamental change to your code so that we actually see improvements again. I'd love to see a number of the OWASP Top 10 items shuffle around in order, but also go away, like XXE did. XXE was very easily fixed by just simply updating your software and turning off a little bit of configuration. And because developer tooling can actually highlight that issue, it went away. It's not even in the top 20. That's a fantastic change. That's the sort of impact we are looking for. We do have some new categories, including insecure design, which is not a bucket. We'll talk about that when we get to it, but it is a fundamental root cause of many of the issues, and we'll talk about those. As always, there's things that are on the cusp, things that didn't quite make it in that are still important and you should consider them. We did a little write-up of what those categories are. We didn't prioritize them in terms of their risk or their exploitability or anything like that. So everything in A11 is of equal weighting. However, by the time you get to the bottom of the A11, you're looking at something that occurs in less than 1% of all applications. So the reality is, should you continue going, I would recommend using the ASVS rather than A11. So where are we at? We did actually have a bit of a problem. And the reason why the OWASP Top 10 is late is because in 2020 there was a pandemic and we just didn't have the data. We had less than 30 or 40,000 apps worth of data when we needed to start writing this time last year. It wasn't enough. The data we had was also of one particular type, which was static code analysis, which skews the results away from high confidence findings. For those of you who are unfamiliar, static code analysis has false positives galore. And when you turn off the false positives, you get almost no results. So the idea of static code analysis is to guide you through hot and cold spots to start identifying what are those issues. I know a lot of places will not give static code analysis tools to developers because they are just, hello world might have 10,000 false positives. I'm exaggerating there, but I would suggest to you that it has a very different skew on the data compared to bug bounties, which someone paid out. Like the results from the bug bounty organizations, people acknowledged the issue, it was a real issue, and someone got paid, whether it was through karma, a t-shirt, or money. Someone got a reward for completing a bug report. So we know that, for example, bug bounties have some of the strongest possible data, but there's not a lot of it compared to, say, for example, from boutiques, from static code analysis and whatnot. So this sort of data analysis, we needed more data and we needed more types of sources. And so we've broken it down into humans assisted by tools, tools assisted by humans, and fully automated. Those sort of data buckets allowed us to normalize the data so that no one type of data overwhelmed any other type of data, but also that then introduces what you may disagree with our weighting is what I'm trying to get at. So we're trying to make the data available so you can do your own analysis. You may be more concerned with what bug bounties are finding, and you can sort of highlight it down to those areas. My personal opinion is that sometimes the market for bug bounties sometimes skews away from things that are easily fixed that then build up to a real bug in some other way. It's like in the early days of bug bounties, people thought that, use after free wasn't exploitable, and then it was, and then all of a sudden all of those bug bounties where that was closed off as not an exploitable issue becomes a really big deal. So I think the market for bug bounty data is very, very important. I think it's a very useful tool. However, you do need to actually start to think about what is the thing that most influences me and my changes. So to learn more about that, please watch Brian Glass's talk. His talk at the 20th anniversary was recorded. I'm currently editing all the talks, and we'll be putting them up and making them available to OWASP members first. And then by about Christmas time, we'll be making them available to everybody. We want to make sure that our members have access to our conferences and our talks much earlier than the general population. We'll be making the keynotes free, but generally, if it's a talk at a conference, particularly paid conferences, members will get access to that material first and for free after the event is finished. So let's get down to it. What is the OWASP Top 10 saying this time? This is one of my favorite photos. It comes from, I found it on Bruce Shania's blog in 2007, which sort of shows you that this has been around forever. It shows a picture of a snowy field with tire marks all over it going around the access control mechanism, and people are parked on the other side of there. So they got themselves free parking by just simply driving around the security control. And that's exactly what we do. Broken access control has always been one of my favorites, and I'm glad it got to number one. It was definitely a miss in the 2007 version. There was enough data in the 2007 version. If we didn't have two crypto-related findings or categories in the 2007, broken access control would have been in the top 10 2007, and maybe we would have avoided some of this stuff. The reality is that broken access control is something I would invest at least a third of my time doing source code reviews and penetration testing because it pays off. I reviewed a piece of logistics software that's used by governments throughout the world to maintain things. I'm not going to talk about what those things are because I don't know if the vendor has fixed it. But let's just say that I was able to act as an administrator without logging in. because nobody, including every single penetration tester and source code reviewer before me in the last 20 years, because their software was not young, had never bothered checking access control matrices, and the developers hadn't either, even though it's functionally testable. So this is an example of where you can get access to some really juicy bug bounty payouts by testing for access control. I think it's really worthwhile doing, and it's certainly worthwhile dedicating up to a third of your testing time to creating an access control matrix and testing it. It's not just about breaching and getting data out. I mean, obviously with the Pandora papers recently, there was a lot of focus on reading data that's not supposed to be out. The reality is you can also cause problems by creating new records and creating garbage, or altering existing records and turning them into junk. For example, giving everybody at a bank $1 billion in money. That is terrible, but it's an access control failure. It's not a business logic flaw. It's an access control failure. You're allowed to deposit all of this money and corrupt all of these records. You can also delete all the data. You can also think about elevation of privilege, so modifying metadata and playing around with tokens and whatnot, so that you become an administrator or a user that acts outside of your own level of authority. So elevation of privilege is not going away anytime soon. And of course, if you don't have access control checks built into your application's controllers, into your data models, into your domain logic, you are going to get owned. So I've seen a lot of code over the time that has very simple setters and getters for domain logic. And it's like, why wouldn't you check that the caller has permission to make the changes that allow you to do, high value transactions? It seems like an extra 2 or 3 lines of code would allow you to prevent a lot of these problems, even if your front end code changes dramatically. So, when I was looking at some of the code back in the mid-2000s, that code is now exposed as APIs on the internet. And you absolutely do need to make sure that APIs are checking for authorization. You can't just assume that the caller is this trusted application that does the access control checks for you. I've seen that on multiple occasions. So the reason why it's number one is that it has privacy and regulatory impacts that can cost you an immense fortune. It also has some of the largest breaches and the largest costs. Going back to the Equifax, one of the data providers breaches back in the 2017 era, but there's been so many, including the Pandora breaches recently. The Epic server release, it might be considered in the public interest for those releases to occur, but the reality is that it's almost certainly some sort of access control that caused that. Number 2 is cryptographic failures. This is sort of like a bucket of all of the cryptographic issues, including bad or malformed, TLS. So if you're not using an SSL tester of some description, you're probably going to not have a great configuration. But it's also some facets of sensitive data exposure. Are you properly encrypting records that should be encrypted? Now, do remember that if you have the key that opens that data on the database server and it's applied automatically, then quite possibly you've got clear text equivalent. Don't rely upon that sort of thing. But obviously for operational reasons, you may need to do so. What you're really trying to prevent there is, like, for example, if someone walking out the door with a backup, or someone walking out the door with a server containing data they shouldn't have. Some of this will be found using static code analysis and code reviews. Others will be found using tooling. I would encourage you to adopt both, just simply to weed this one out. I think this can go down in priority because, again, a lot of static code analysis tools and CI/CD tools will discover this automatically, and it needs to be prioritized as technical debt so it can get down. Injections, we are seeing this finally fall down, and it's because people are using safer frameworks. They've moved to ORMs and entity frameworks, which don't generally have bog standard SQL injection. They have their own form, but generally it's much better. But they're also using display frameworks, view frameworks that has less cross-site scripting. Obviously, you can't move all your code at once, and so there's still some of that happening. But we're starting to see that in only 3.4% of apps are we actually getting to the place where injections occur. When it happens, it's really bad, and that's why it's so high. But 3.4% of all apps is pretty low. And that said, it's still being found a lot. We've got 32,000 odd CVEs in 2020. That represents one of those CWEs that is mentioned. Insecure design. Now, it does have 40 CWEs, and people might think, hey, this is a bucket. This is where I toss everything that could be potentially described as a design flaw. But you've got to look at it in a particular way, and that is the control, should there be a control here? Is it present? Does it work? Is it in use? That's what this is about. And the only way to really find this is to do the real shift left. Jeff Williams had a talk at the 20th anniversary, which I highly recommend you watch when it becomes available, where he talks about shifting wrong, not just shift left. It doesn't mean doing penetration testing earlier. It means working with the developers. We want to make sure that when we do shift left, we're a part of the team. We're actually building together. You can't review your way to building an application. You absolutely sometimes have to get your hands dirty and actually code. And I would suggest as an AppSec professional, you need to get into threat modeling if you're not already doing it. If you're not threat modeling as a penetration tester, you are missing out, because the sorts of threats we're talking about here are the ones that will get the business to fix it. If you can actually show that an attacker, as an attacker, I can view and modify everyone's profiles because you've threat modeled that and you've tested it, there's no control, and now I can get in there. All of a sudden, you're actually at a very high level. You're not just running a scanning tool over the application, although you should still do that, to find the low-hanging fruit. Threat modeling provides high-value business transactions that business truly cares about, and they will fix it. Unlike, for example, if they find a Stack Overflow or something like that that doesn't really end up with any exploitability, that may be there in 3 years' time. We want people to adopt better frameworks, and what we're suggesting here is for the AppSec teams to work with the development teams to create secure paved roads. There's a bunch of really good information on this out there, including some talks at AppSec Cali and other places, from panels with Netflix, others that have adopted what might have been considered a few years ago as a unicorn behavior, which is this paved road concept. It's essentially saying that the AppSec team will help developer teams build secure AMIs, secure frameworks, and tools to observe where bad patterns occur or out-of-date paved roads exist. Because one of the things I noted when I was watching one of those talks, when I was preparing these slides, is just because you have a secure AMI doesn't mean it always stays secure. And what happens with a development team doesn't know that they need to update their part of the secure paved road. So building observability into your paved road, who's using it? What version are they using? Is there an issue that they need to address by adopting a later version? It should always be the easiest possible pathway to adopt the paved road rather than doing it the hard way and the insecure way. So you're saving the development team hundreds, if not thousands of hours and eliminating technical debt and eliminating insecurity by working with the development teams, not telling them that their baby is ugly. That gets you absolutely nowhere. Work with the development teams to help them save time, build faster, build more secure. It's like a win-win-win for everybody, except for one small problem, is that application security professionals are not entirely scalable, and there's not a lot of us. But this, again, once you start building it, actually helps with that scalability problem, because you don't need to do it again and again and again. You're actually building something that can be used by hundreds of development teams if you're in a very large organization. And that's exactly what you should be trying to do. We want people to do testing. And part of the insecure design issue is that people don't test for functional security flaws. We want unit tests, integration tests, and obviously you can use OWASP with Zest scripting and other scripting mechanisms It's fully API scriptable. You can actually build into the CI/CD process full-on end-to-end unit integration and security testing, like penetration testing every single build. That's incredibly powerful. And a lot of security tools that are commercial in nature don't even have that. And yet one of the tools from OWASP, which is OWASP SAP, has this capability. Make sure you do check out some of our projects like SAP that actually allow you to get into the next generation of security testing. Security misconfiguration. We saw this jump not because the problems have got worse in terms of impact, but because it becomes much more prevalent. Because we're seeing things like Terraform scripts or CloudFormation scripts now being code and checked into the code base, tools can now investigate the configuration of how it's built. And once we start seeing that, you can start saying, well, this is something we can check every single build. And so we're starting to see it appear in the top 10 data set. So again, the solution here is the paved road. We talk about it a fair bit in how to adopt the OWASP Top 10 as a SDLC. Honestly, you do need to surface the risk and make it available. I would strongly suggest, as we'll see with the outdated components, if it's got an outdated component, warn the developers. If it's got a vulnerable component, do not let that get into production. But you also then need to come back and say, well, what is in production that has vulnerable components? And then that's the technical debt that needs to be eliminated now. I once did some work for an organization. They had 1,300 apps and 90 days to look at them. Imagine if you could just simply look at your CI/CD server and say, these are the 15 apps that we need to look at. That's the difference between what I'm suggesting to you here and what we had to do, which is to get approximately 200 people doing penetration tests and code reviews in 90 days. Not everybody can do 200 pen tests at once for a single customer. That costs a lot of money. Why not just build it into CI/CD and reduce and eliminate that money? Here we are with vulnerable and outdated components. It is the root cause of the largest and most costly breach of all time, over $230 million the last time I looked. And that's because Apache Commons was outdated. And it wasn't because Apache Commons, Apache Commons had another issue inside itself, which allowed this to occur. But this actually is covered off in the latest US government executive order. And I know that doesn't apply to the folks in the UK, but honestly, you do need to think about supply chain security. And this has been in the OWASP Top 10 for some considerable period of time now. For those of you who have connections in Australia, the ASD Essential 8 actually covers this in patching applications. They give you like 1 day. I'm not joking, 1 day to patch your applications for things that are really critical. On average, we do see when people have a known exploit, it takes them less than 4 hours to create an exploit that can then be abused against you. So anybody who has quarterly patch sessions, yeah, you're doing it wrong. So the biggest problem we have here is that the CWEs for this are self-referential back to the OWASP Top 10 2013 and 2017. And it's not because this is not a problem. It is. It's definitely a huge problem. It's just the way that CWE is not a requirement. So we are working on, there is a team interest, if you're interested in this, a thing called the Common Requirements Enumeration. And it's going to help bring all of these different things from ISO 27000 to, for example, the IGGC, the OWASP Top 10, the ASVS, the NIST cybersecurity framework. The idea is CRE will actually enumerate a list of requirements that then can be referred back. And I can guarantee you CRE will have a single category for vulnerable and outdated components. And that means that essentially we can start saying, this is a better way of referring to vulnerabilities, not from weaknesses, which is the absence or the ineffective controls, but a missing requirement. And this is one of those times. Identification and authentication failures. Back in the early 2000s, I had a really long talk with an intellectual property lawyer. And one of his concerns back then was this thing called evidence of identity. A lot of the early 2000s in Australia was about know your customer. It wasn't called that back then, but essentially it was a very big thing. We had anti-money laundering laws that required 100 points of proof that you are who you say you are. So if you ever wondered why the OWASP Top 10 2017, the ASVS, and now the 10 2021 prohibits questions and answers, is because it's not a very strong know your customer. It's literally along the lines of, if I happen to know my birth date, where I was born, and what my school mascot is, you've got a pretty good chance if I actually used those actual answers. That's terrible OPSEC. So anybody who's on LinkedIn, who's on Twitter, who's had a birthday party, you're relying upon the good graces of others to not breach your operational security. So questions and answers are absolutely prohibited in NIST 800-63. They're actually prohibited in the ASVS. They're prohibited in the OWASP Top 10 for the last 4 years. Get rid of them. There's a difference between the evidence of identity, who is this person, or what are the claims they're making to say that this is who I am, and controls around authentication. Obviously, we want to protect against reused or breached passwords. I'm not asking you to crack it, but my Microsoft account, I've had the same password since 1997. It is a random password. It is very long. It's never been breached. Therefore, I don't need to change it. And this is what I'm trying to get across to folks. Unless it's breached, it's unimportant as to what the password is, as long as you've got MFA, which I do for that account. But also, use strong passwords. Use a password manager, and that's what we ask you to do. We also encourage you to look at ASVS levels of V2 and V3 at level 1. It's really important. It's almost 100% aligned with what NIST 800-63 does. So if you're a risk information manager, a risk manager, or someone who has to comply with a bunch of different standards, we went out of our way not to create new problems for you and unique controls that if you do the ASVS, you are doing something unique compared to NIST. What we really want is ISO 27002 and others to catch up. We don't want to basically force you to do a whole ton of new things when there's this really good evidence-based criteria, which is NIST 800-63, that you should be doing to protect your application. Once you eliminate people who you don't know, you have no idea who they are, you get rid of them, you're now stuck with people you've probably got with some sort of contractual arrangement, and they've signed something or they've agreed to some level of terms of service, rather than just some random hacker on the internet. That changes the context of what you can do about breaches after they've logged in. So this is an essential component. It might be number 7, but it's right up there. It's just that because people have started to adopt MFA, we are starting to see this fall down. It's only in 2.6% of apps. So you're starting to see this is becoming rarer and rarer, and I love it. This is exactly the sort of impact that we want with the OWASP Top 10. Software integrity failures is a new one. This is a root cause. What we're trying to say here is that applications aren't doing a very good job at the moment of protecting the integrity of data. For those of you who have done CSSPs or CISSPs, will know that there's the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of this triad of the information security world. The OWASP Top 10 for a long time had nothing for the integrity part of it, but it was there, and it's in 2% of all apps, that you can violate the integrity of the data within the app itself, or the update mechanism. So I was participating in a software bill of materials workshop recently, and there was a lot of bike shedding around whether or not we needed to know how software was built, what flags were built, and how to reproduce a build. What does that actually even mean with something like Microsoft 365? I mean, that's a piece of software that updates itself almost daily. What does it even mean to know how Microsoft compiled that code when you don't have access to that code? I think there's a lot of stuff that's still outstanding here, but I do know that having a software bill of materials that says, here is a tool that you can use to verify that everything you've received is legit, and that you, like for example, if you're a developer and you're a Node developer, you know that if you include Express, you're probably going to have around 1,200, 1,300 other things pulled in from NPM, just simply to make Express go. Do you trust every single one of them? How do you know it's real? Did you get that from a real repo that's run by the NPM project? If not, what are you going to do about it? Well, this is something that we have identified that happens like 2% of the time. Software updates, CI/CD, software sub-resource integrity, build repos that come from untrusted sources. We want to make sure that all of these things are dealt with. I think it's relatively straightforward. I would recommend for the folks to have a read of this section and understand what it's really about before starting to say, oh, but that can only be addressed with. No. It can be reasonably easily addressed as long as you've done some threat modeling and you understand where the integrity failures might creep in and then do something about to protect them. Security logging and monitoring, the community, this is one of the 2 community agreed items. In 2017, we held a 2-day workshop at the Open Security Summit. It was held somewhere in London. It was a great thing. I didn't go, I was there virtually. We worked on how do we create the top 10? There was a lot of problems with people just felt the top 10 popped out of nowhere after a period of time. How is it built? And so again, go to Brian's talk. He discusses this a lot, but essentially I would strongly recommend with security logging and monitoring, the previous talk about event stuff is really important. The reason why is people log, but they may not log security related events. And then if they do log security related events, are they actually looking at it and would they respond to it? And this is a bit of a problem for penetration testers because now you've got this thing that you can't actually easily identify if it occurred, which is, did you detect me when I was busy hammering you? So what I would suggest is for those people who are not familiar with auditing, audit should be a legally protected profession and term. If you haven't got an accounting degree majoring in auditing, you should not be allowed to call yourself an auditor. But what they do is they actually ask questions and then get evidence for the answers to those questions. So say, for example, they might ask to see that, yes, we have a receipt system and that people upload the receipts and we will not pay your expenses unless those receipts match up, and they will sample the results. They will actually go and check a certain number of transactions. It's called sampling. It should be 5% of the total, but in many large organizations, it might just be 50 or 60. What they'll do is they'll pull them down just randomly and have a look and see whether or not they actually have the receipts. If they actually do match up, and did they get paid without receipts, or if the things didn't match. So they're looking to see whether or not the controls are in place and effective, and then getting evidence for it. So if you're a penetration tester, you've got no way of understanding, were there logs of me, and what would you have done if you discovered me? You just need to ask. There's nothing wrong with asking. Go hard and then ask, did you detect me? And what would you have done about it? It's a very simple stage. You can do it a few days before you finish your work. In many cases, you've got 2 or 3 days to do the write-up, sometimes less, sometimes a lot less. But you can certainly ask the question and wait to see what the answers are. And then the newest one is server-side request forgery. And we were so happy to, Orange Josiah reached out to him. He's one of the world's leading researchers of SSRF. If you're not familiar with his work, please look at him on Twitter. He has links to a whole bunch of his videos and his research. If you don't know how to do SSRF today, please learn. It's really important, but I do hope that, like XXC, it can get rid of it. All it really means is that you're accepting URLs and then the different parsers treat the URLs differently and they may have access to things that they shouldn't have. And so in cloud environments, it's dead simple. You just simply create virtual VPCs and network security groups that prevent people talking to each other. It's dead simple. Apps can be isolated from each other. However, in traditional on-premises work, you may have a very flat internal network, and SSRF is a lot more horrible to you because they can walk around your network and do all sorts of things. His Black Hat 2017 talk, he took over a source code, a public source code repository organization just using SSRF. So please go watch some of his stuff. The work that he's done since 2017, it's like magic. If you've never seen SSRF done before, oh my goodness, you're in for a treat. Learn how to do it. It's dead simple. It does require a little bit of work on your behalf to set up. You do need a system that's on the internet that can be communicated with the servers you're testing, but it is important you test. If you've never tested for SSRF before, practice, practice, practice. OS Juice Shop has an SSRF lesson, but because it's so problematic, it's disabled by default. You need to enable it. So go ahead and practice SSRF in Juice Shop. You may need to launch your own version of it. It's not in the version that's available online, through Heroku or whatever. You need to actually fire up your own Juice Shop and enable that lesson. The next steps, we talked about this, covers off things such as code quality issues, denial of service, and memory management errors. I've recently been learning Go. We are seeing a resurgence of Go and Rust being used for API servers. And although those languages are generally memory safe, a better way of putting it is they are memory safer. We are starting to see memory management errors such as integer overflows and unmanaged memory starting to creep back as being an issue. If you have developers working with systems languages for your APIs, you absolutely do need to spend some time reviewing code for memory management errors. Those languages, as I said, have a lot of checks, in particular Rust. If you stay within the borrower mechanism that's built into Rust, you are going to be quite safe. If you go into Go or Rust and start using some of the lower level stuff that allows you to talk directly to memory in a way that it's not designed to do, yeah, you're going to have fun. So just wrapping this talk up, frameworks. If you have known dodgy frameworks and old frameworks that don't protect against bug classes, get rid of them. If you have frameworks that you are looking to adopt, there are generally good frameworks out there like Vue, React, and others that will actually protect you from yourself if you convert your code to them. So always look out and see whether or not you can eliminate bug classes by adopting a better framework, particularly if you're doing it for other reasons as well, such as a visual refresh, or you're moving away from an RDBMS to, say, for example, an OSQL engine. You can do much better as you come across and do that refactoring that's going to happen anyway. We do want you to improve your AppSec program. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff like the proactive controls, the ASVS, the cheat sheets, the web testing guide. I do want people, if you've got some spare time, please help out the Education and Training Committee. They are working on an industry and tertiary curriculum. They are working on the framework at the moment. I would encourage you to get involved. We really do need to have a open source, free to use industry and tertiary curriculum that can be adopted by anyone. I really do ask for assistance there. Adrian Winkles, who's part of, I believe, one of your UK chapters out there, is on the Education and Training Committee. I'm pretty sure he could use all the help that they can get. Things are going a lot slower than I would expect. Okay, we do have a Slack channel, the Project Top 10, and of course you can reach us at the at GitHub, but I will show you where the actual top 10 is and what it looks like, and I'll take questions after that. Actually, while I just get this up, come on, Firefox, you can do it. It is that simple. It's literally owas.org/top10, and here is the top 10. One of the great things is we are now able to be translated, and it works directly. We've got all these different languages that are coming in, such as Brazil, Portuguese, and whatnot. So absolutely, it's now consumable on a mobile phone and whatnot, and it is fantastic. So one thing I will say to you is that there is this table that we're trying to figure out how to fix up and make look good. That doesn't work on a mobile phone. Just if you're interested in the actual data, we will be having data available in our GitHub repo, which is available at the top right here. If you're able to translate to another language, please do come and talk to us. we are very, very interested in translations, and it's dead simple to do. You literally, you go to here, you click on fork, and you present us with a pull request with a translation, and we will get it reviewed by another native speaker, and from there it'll get put in, and that's how the other ones have occurred. So we'll see if we've got any. Yeah, we've got a Taiwanese version, the Italian translation. You know, it's very simple for us to actually include your translations if you are prepared to do it. Just create a pull request against us and we'll get it done. So, questions?
Excellent. Thank you very much for a fantastic talk, Andrew. I thought I knew stuff about OWASP Top 10. Turns out that there are a lot of very interesting points that you raised, and you probably answered some of the questions that I had. Let me just check if we have any questions on YouTube Q&A and also on the Slido. If you've got questions, please make sure you do use the YouTube Q&A and Slido/OWASP. Andrea, do we have any questions? Can you please read them out?
Sure. So from YouTube, we've got a comment, I think, from Ed Daniel. Thank you. So he's talking about the insecure design item on that list. Says that we could complement this with guardrails approach, which, yeah, to be more explicit about that, yeah, without within building securely. So that's more of a comment.
Yep, that's a perfectly valid comment. We're actually looking for the long form version of the ASVS. We're working on the ASVS version 5, and we want to include some of that detail. We want to revise the architecture section in the ASVS to actually have more details on guardrails, the paved road, and other mechanisms that people can adopt.
Perfect. Thank you. And we also have a couple of questions on Slido. So the first one is about outdated libraries. This is quite interesting. They're not always a vulnerability. So they say if a new version breaks backward compatibility, but doesn't fix any security issues, why should we upgrade? So
what we're asking for is outdated software to be warned. And what we're doing there is making sure that you don't get stuck in like back in the mid-2000s, there was this wonderful display framework called Struts. And Struts 2.0 was like, shouldn't even be called Struts. But people didn't prepare for it because it was so vastly different. Now, I've literally been working on a piece of code that was in Node 12, and I'm taking it up to Node 16, and you'd be surprised at just how hard that is. And I know that eventually Node 12 will become like I won't be able to get support for it. I need to be warned. I need to have some observability that there is a later version of Node. There's a safe version of Node 12 right now, but there is a later version of Node that you should be using. And that's what I'm asking for. If you've got a piece of code, you've pulled in a library, and for example, one of the common complaints about this section is that library, we use this function. This bit over there that's vulnerable, we don't even call. Why would you force me to update? Well, get into the habit of updating so that when there is a vulnerability that you need to patch in one day, you can, because it's not hard. Whereas if you let this slide forever and ever and ever, it becomes technical debt. And then when you've got 3 to 4 hours to redeploy your entire production stack because you've got a piece of code that is now extremely vulnerable, you can't. And you may get owned. Please don't do that. Provide observability for outdated components and then enforce vulnerable components.
Perfect. That makes sense. Thank you. And the last question on Slido is about cross-site scripting. Why is it gone as a separate category? This person does bug bounty, yeah, and it's still being published. It was still published as part of their top 10 and still being paid out.
Yes. So the reality is that we didn't want injections to not be in the OWASP Top 10, and by just including the entire pattern, which is user-supplied hostile input intermingled in program code. When we included every single CWE that has that pattern, it stayed in the OWASP Top 10. If we withdrew cross-site scripting and HTML and JavaScript injection from that pattern, we wouldn't have had enough data to include injections at all. And then we would have lost both cross-site scripting and SQL injection out of the OWASP Top 10. And I think that would have been a mistake.
Yep. Thank you. And actually, there's one more question from my side. As I'm daily struggling to get, engineers to pay attention to me. And actually, I know that they care about security. I am fortunate enough to now work in a place where people know why it's important and why they should pay attention to it and why they need patching and they need to care for OWASP and everything else. But how would you actually go about convincing them that AppSec should be sort of embedded in what they do without thinking that, you're overloading them? They're already extremely busy and extremely stressed. This is something that I'm always struggling to find out on my own.
My first and best advice is be a part of the team, provide them a solution and say why it's important, not only to the business, but also to them. If you constantly come in and say, I need you to fix this little tiny problem that's not hurt anybody, and you waste a lot of their time by giving them hundreds of really big fat reports that don't even know where to start, you're not really a solution. You're actually an impediment to going live. Work on solutions with them, become a trusted partner. And once they start seeing you like performance testers as being a necessary part of getting out into production, rather than just a hurdle that they have to get past, because they, like performance testers pull up and show that their code has to be improved. They don't want to do it, but the reality is that it can be really quite bad for the business if it doesn't work. Same with security. It's a cost that you have to pay. But if you're a part of the solution that actually helps get over that hurdle and they trust you and you don't waste their time with little things, I think you'll have a much better relationship with them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Yes, excellent. Thanks very much, Andrea. It was an amazing talk. We are seeing some good feedback as well, saying that's an impressive update to the OWASP Top 10. And I think the fact that it's mobile is mobile friendly is very important. One interesting question was, I think you may have kind of mentioned it during the talk, when is the PDF version going to be available? Because all other OWASP Top 10s exist as PDF in a nice sort of printable, publishable format. I even happen to own a printed format. Just one sec. Let me show you. This is a paper version of OWASP Top 10 2007, which was actually published and printed.
Sharif has tasked me with getting the books, the OWASP books updated, and I think the OWASP Top 10 would be a great one to start with. We're actually getting Hugo to take the markdown and actually apply his new graphic design. It'll have come out as an Adobe Illustrator file, and one of the problems we've got with opaque file formats like that is it's actually really hard for people to work with those opaque formats. But as a PDF that we could then get published as a book, but also a PDF that could be available on the website, I think this is actually a good test to make sure that it works, but also then we can start revitalizing our PDFs and books available to the wider public. So I should have been at a leadership meeting. I'm missing it right now, where we're supposed to discuss this, but at the end of the day, this is actually quite important as well. So I'm sure my other three colleagues... We'll get there. It's soon. Trust me.
As soon as possible. Fantastic. Yeah, excellent. Okay, great. I think this is it. I don't see any further questions in Slido. I don't think there's. There's one. No, there's one new. Yeah. Do you want to ask this one, Andrea?
Sure. So converting security into the language of the board, money, customers, profits. It's not happened to me. So why am I bothered and bumping up the pipeline?
So if you really want change, like I worked on a project in 2007 where they were trying to get the video of their annual general meeting up onto their website. So this is early days for audio visual presentations on websites. You got to remember, Web 2.0 is brand new. When I showed them that I could put Rick Astley's Rickroll into the annual general meeting and make that the thing they got to see, and then I said I could make it your competitor's promotion, I could make it an adult video, it got fixed. If you put it into the language of the board, the language of the business, things get fixed. If you concentrate on small technical issues that are easily resolved, that no one cares about, you're going to be irrelevant. Do spend the time to understand what drives the business. If you understand what drives the business, you'll be a very successful person in your company.
Yep, perfect. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Andrew. I think we should probably start a new OWASP project, which is going to be like OWASP Top 10 for the board, right? It's like a how to demo cross-site scripting to the board, how to demo the risk of insecure design or insufficient logging.
Well, people are going to have to get better because Chrome has just got rid of alert boxes from third-party websites.
That's right. Yeah. So
alert 1 gone. Yes.
People will now have to find some other ways of popping up cross-site scripting proofs of concepts. Excellent. Okay, thanks very much, Andrew. Of course, amazing. Thank you very much for your time today with us at OWASP London. Amazing talk. And yeah, we wish OWASP Top 10 project all the very best, and we're looking forward to seeing those printed books, and of course OWASP Top 10 being available in more formats and in more languages as well. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Right, the last few words, just to remind everyone that if you'd like to follow us and to make sure that you don't miss the next event, you can do it on our webpage on owasp.org. You can also follow us on Twitter. We are also on Facebook. You can just like our page on Facebook, which is facebook.com/OWASP-London. We're also on Meetup and on LinkedIn as well as OWASP London. Of course, you are watching us live on YouTube right now, where we have a channel called OWASP London, where we publish the recordings of all the past events for you, so you can watch them again. We will also publish the slides on our webpage as well. And of course, we're also on OWASP Slack. So if you'd like to join OWASP Slack, we have a dedicated channel for our chapter-London. A reminder of the next event is going to be on October 19th and 20th. That's a free secure coding tournament for developers run by Secure Code Warrior. You can just register free and participate, and the top prizes are $400 Amazon gift cards. I would like to say a big thank you to our speakers today, to Andrew van der Stok and Miriam Wiesner, and of course to all our chapter supporters as well. And a reminder, if you would like to support OWASP London chapter, please get in touch. And yeah, the final reminder that recordings will be available, and we will let you know once we start running our events in real life in person. Thanks very much, everyone, and stay safe. Bye.